we need to talk about bridge signals, because this is something we're going to start using as we kind of progress in our training. The bridge signal is going to be a really helpful tool to help our horses understand what we're asking. So what is a bridge signal? My most simple answer is that a bridge signal is something that tells the learner that a reward is coming. So things that are used as bridge signals, most commonly, you're probably going to see people using a clicker. We could also use a verbal sound or word. A tongue click is commonly used as well. You might also use something like a flashing light or hand signals for animals that are hearing impaired. But what we want to consider with bridge signals is that they need to be clear. They need to be the same each time. So if you're making a verbal sound, you need to be able to reproduce that sound the same way each time. If you pick a word, for example, sometimes I'll use the word yes, but I don't want to say yes with different intonation, because that can be confusing for the learner, and the different tone of voice might make it sound like a totally different word, and they may not recognize it as their bridge signal. So if you're using a word, you just want to use the same kind of intonation, the same kind of inflection each time. So when I say yes, I kind of use like a monotone, kind of a terse way of saying it. So however you feel the most comfortable, whatever you are able to do the best is what you're going to use. I really encourage people to use a clicker in the early stages of training, particularly, and when training with a horse that's new to clicker training, because it's the most crisp, clear, precise thing. And it's also not something that a sound that's made, during other times. That's something else to consider with words. If it's a word that you say to your horse, or say around your horse when you're not training, then, or even while you're training, if you're chatting with someone, can be very confusing because they think they're being marked for a behavior when in fact you're just chit-chatting. So we want bridge signals to be easily repeatable in the same fashion, a crisp, clear, concise, quick sound, and something that's not going to be repeated at times when you don't mean for it to be repeated. Now, one little thing to think about at our little bullet point here at the end, reaching into your treat pouch or your pocket can become its own bridge signal. So just something to be aware of as we start training. That can be used to your advantage, or it can be a disadvantage. So just pay attention to that as we go forward. Bridge signals are going to be a really important tool in your positive reinforcement toolbox for a couple of reasons. First, maybe the most obvious thing, is that it buys us time between when the behavior occurs and when the reward is actually delivered. There's going to be times when you're training, when you're right next to the horse's head, that maybe it's pretty easy to deliver a reward immediately when the behavior is occurring. But once we start introducing a little bit of distance, or when we're doing behaviors with movement, or maybe when you're riding your horse, the ability to deliver the food as the correct behavior is occurring is going to be basically impossible. So that bridge signal starts to mark exactly when the behavior is being rewarded, and that buys us that time so we can walk over to the horse, or we can have him, reach for the reward if we're riding. We have a lot more leeway built in, and the horse can still understand what was being rewarded. If we didn't have a clicker and the horse was 20 feet away from us and we're trying to reward a behavior, by the time you get over to him, he could be doing something totally different that's not actually what you wanted to reward, and that can be super confusing and frustrating for everybody. The bridge signal also allows for a lot more precision targeting in our training. So when we're trying to dial in behaviors and really shape something with subtle changes or really precise things, the clicker is going to be the key for getting for getting the horse to understand those subtle differences. And then finally, kind of along the same lines, the bridge signal can really increase clarity for the learner. When I see people struggling with their horses or horses getting frustrated with the training and disengaging or getting sometimes way too amped, a lot of times what's happening is that the horse doesn't really understand the criteria. They don't really understand what behavior is getting rewarded. So the more clear we can be with our criteria in training, and a lot of times that can be really helped with the use of a bridge signal, then the easier our training, the smoother it's going to go, the quicker it's going to go with our horses.